The Great Hall of Nexus Prime had never been so quiet. Ambassador Zethkar stood at the center of the circular chamber, his blue skin pale with fear. Around him sat the representatives of 12 different alien species, each one more desperate than the last. The Galactic Coalition, once the mightiest force in the galaxy, was dying. "We have lost another system," Zethkar announced, his voice echoing in the vast space. "The Kepler sector is gone. 3 billion souls consumed in less than a day." The other ambassadors shifted in their seats. Some closed their eyes. Others made the religious gestures of their people. They all knew what this meant. The Devourers were getting closer to the core worlds with each passing week. The Devourers had awakened 6 months ago from somewhere deep in the galaxy's edge. No one knew where they came from or why they had started their rampage now. They were machines, ancient and terrible, that ate everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire civilizations. Nothing could stop them. General Thrixvel, the Coalition's top military commander, stood up. His forearms trembled as he activated the holographic display. The galaxy map appeared above them, showing red zones where the Devourers had already struck. The red was spreading like a disease. "Every weapon we have tried has failed," Thrixvel said. "Our plasma cannons barely scratch their hulls. Our quantum torpedoes explode harmlessly against their shields. We sent our best fleets, our bravest warriors. They are all gone now." The synthetic collective representative, a chrome-plated being, called Unit 7, spoke in its mechanical voice. "Our computational models show a 0.3% chance of survival if current trends continue. We require a new variable in the equation." Ambassador Velth of the telepathic Velani people nodded sadly. "Even our mind powers cannot touch them. They have no thoughts we can read, no emotions we can influence. They are pure logic and hunger." Zethkar looked around the room at the faces of a dozen dying civilizations. Each species had ruled star systems, built wonders, created art and music and literature. Now they were all refugees in their own galaxy. "There is one option left," he said quietly. "One species we have not asked for help." The room fell silent. Everyone knew who he meant. "The humans," whispered Ambassador Kreeth of the warrior Kethmore. "But they are primitives, savages. We excluded them from the Coalition for good reasons. They are violent beyond measure." "Agreed," the crystalline being Chardon. "Their entire history is war and bloodshed. They solve every problem with weapons and death." Zethkar nodded. "Yes, they are everything we tried to evolve beyond. But perhaps that is exactly what we need now." Far away, on the edge of human space, Commander Lisa Parker sat in her captain's chair aboard the diplomatic vessel Mercury. She was reading reports from Earth when her communications officer looked up with surprise. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from Nexus Prime. It's marked as urgent diplomatic priority." Lisa frowned. The Galactic Coalition had never sent them anything more than basic trade agreements. They barely acknowledged that humans existed. "Put it through to my ready room." Minutes later, Lisa stared at the holographic image of Ambassador Inai. Zethkar. The alien looked exhausted and afraid. When he began to speak, his words shocked her. "Commander Parker, I am sending this message on behalf of the Galactic Coalition. We need humanity's help. We are facing extinction, and we believe your species may be our only hope." Lisa paused the message and called her senior staff. Within an hour, Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Force was sitting across from her, along with Dr. Amanda Scott, their top alien expert. Jake was a big man with gray hair and scars from the border wars. He had fought against alien pirates and raiders for 20 years. His face was hard as stone as he listened to the full message. "They excluded us from their little club," Jake said when the message ended. "Called us too violent, too aggressive. Said we weren't civilized enough to join their perfect society. Now they want our help?" Dr. Scott leaned forward. "Jake, listen to what they're facing. These devourers have destroyed entire civilizations, species that were thousands of years more advanced than us. If they reach human space, we'll fight them, Jake said simply. That's what we do. But why should we help the aliens who look down on us? Lisa studied the star charts that came with the message. The red zones were spreading fast. At this rate, the Devourers would reach human colonies within a year. Because if we don't help them now, we'll be facing the Devourers alone later, she said. And they'll be even stronger after consuming the rest of the galaxy. The message continued with more details. The Devourers were not just destroying things, they were learning from each victory. Every ship they consumed made them smarter. Every technology they absorbed made them deadlier. They had already adapted to every weapon the Coalition possessed. Look at this, Dr. Scott said, pointing to the tactical data. The Kethmore threw everything they had at one Devourer fleet, 40,000 ships, their entire military. The battle lasted 6 hours. Not one Kethmore ship survived. Jake whistled low. He had fought the Kethmore during the border wars. They were some of the fiercest warriors he had ever faced. If they couldn't even slow down the Devourers, what chance did anyone have? The Synthetic Collective tried next, Dr. Scott continued. They're pure logic, like living computers. They calculated the perfect strategy, used the most efficient tactics. The Devourers defeated them in 4 hours. What about the Velani? Lisa asked. Their psychic powers are incredible. Useless. The Devourers have no minds to affect. They're machines, but not like any machines we understand. They think, they learn, they adapt, but they have no consciousness that telepaths can touch. Jake stood up and walked to the viewport. Outside, stars twinkled peacefully in the darkness. Somewhere out there, an enemy was coming that had never been defeated. So every advanced species in the galaxy has tried, and failed, he said. The warriors, the geniuses, the psychics, all gone, and now they want the humans to try. The question is, what can we do that they couldn't? Lisa asked. Dr. Scott pulled up human military records. According to their data, we're the only species that practices what they call chaotic warfare. Every other civilization fights with honor, follows rules, uses logical strategies. And we don't, Jake said with a grim smile. We don't, Dr. Scott agreed. We fight dirty, we break rules. We do things that seem insane, but somehow work. Remember the Hegemony War, when Admiral Peterson rammed his flagship into their command ship? Every other species called it barbaric suicide. We called it victory. Lisa thought about humanity's military history. Wars where outnumbered forces had won through pure stubbornness. Battles where retreat meant death, so soldiers chose to fight. Impossible odds instead. Campaigns where the enemy had every advantage except the will to keep fighting when any sane being would surrender. They're asking us to be their monsters, she said quietly. Maybe the galaxy needs monsters right now, Jake replied. Maybe civilized isn't enough when you're facing extinction. The communication system chimed with another urgent message. This one was from Admiral Robert Hayes, commander of the Terran Defense Force. His face appeared on the screen, serious and determined. I've been in contact with the Coalition, he said. They're sending a full briefing on the Devourer threat. I'm assembling a task force. Every available ship, every Marine battalion, every pilot who can fly. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Lisa looked at Jake and Dr. Scott. They were talking about going to war against an enemy that had never lost a battle. An enemy that had consumed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. It should have been terrifying. Instead, Jake was smiling. It was the smile of a predator who had finally found worthy prey. When do we leave? He asked. 3 days later, Colonel Ryan Mitchell stood before a room full of alien representatives aboard the Coalition flagship Harmony. The aliens sat stiffly in their chairs, their faces showing mixtures of hope and fear. They had asked for humanity's help, but now they were about to learn exactly what that meant. You want to know why the galaxy fears us, Ryan said, activating the holographic display. Let me show you the Battle of Crimson Ridge. The hologram showed a barren planet with red rocky mountains. 2 fleets faced each other in orbit. Human, ships on one side, the alien hegemony on the other. The hegemony had more ships, Bigger guns, better shields. By every measure, they should have won easily. The hegemony had us outnumbered 3-1, Ryan continued. Their admiral demanded our surrender. He promised to treat our crews well if we gave up without a fight. Ambassador Zethkar leaned forward. That seems reasonable. Why did you not accept? Ryan smiled coldly. Because humans don't surrender when we can still fight. Watch what Admiral Peterson did instead. The hologram showed the human flagship suddenly accelerating directly toward the hegemony command vessel. The aliens in the room gasped as they watched the two massive ships collide in a ball of fire and metal. Peterson rammed his ship into theirs while all hands were still aboard, Ryan said. 4,000 human lives lost in 10 seconds. But it killed their admiral and threw their entire fleet into chaos. Our remaining ships won the battle in 30 minutes. General Thrixvel's forearms trembled. That is madness. No civilized species would sacrifice so many lives for a tactical advantage. Exactly, Ryan said. That's why it worked. The hegemony. Couldn't predict it because no sane commander would do it. But humans aren't always sane in battle. We're willing to pay prices that break other species. He changed the display to show another battle. This time, human ground forces were fighting on a frozen world against insectoid aliens called the Swarm. The Swarm surrounded our Marines at Firebase Delta, Ryan explained. 300 humans against 30,000 Swarm warriors. The aliens expected us to fight defensively, maybe hold out for a few hours before being overrun. The hologram showed human soldiers abandoning their fortified positions and charging directly into the enemy mass. It looked like suicide. Instead, our people grabbed every explosive they had and ran straight at the enemy. They turned themselves into human bombs. The Swarm had never seen anything like it. They broke and ran after losing half their force. Dr. Amanda Scott, who had arrived with the human delegation, spoke up from the back of the room. Other species fight to preserve themselves. Humans fight to destroy the enemy. We see our own deaths as acceptable if it means victory. The alien representatives looked disturbed. The crystalline Chardon spoke in its musical voice. Your species treats life so carelessly. How can you function as a society? Admiral Kate Sullivan stepped forward. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and eyes like chips of ice. Her uniform bore the scars of a dozen battles. We don't treat life carelessly, she said. We treat victory as more important than individual survival. Let me show you our ship designs. The hologram changed to display a human battle cruiser. Next to it appeared ships from various coalition species, sleek, efficient vessels with clean lines and minimal weapons. Your ships are beautiful, Kate said. Elegant, designed for maximum efficiency with minimum waste. They're works of art. She pointed to the human ship. It was ugly by comparison. Thick armor, oversized weapons, redundant systems visible all over its hull. Our ships are built on the assumption that they're going to be shot full of holes and still need to fight. Every human vessel carries 3 times more firepower than ships its size from other species. Every system has backups. Every crew member is trained to keep fighting even when the ship is falling apart around them. Unit 7 of the Synthetic Collective processed this information with electronic clicks. Such designs are inefficient. The resource allocation is suboptimal. Inefficient, yes, Kate agreed, but effective. When a coalition ship loses its main reactor, the crew evacuates. When a human ship loses its main reactor, we switch to backup power and keep shooting. She showed them battle footage from the Border Wars. Human ships with massive holes in their hulls, atmosphere streaming out, still firing their guns. Crews working in vacuum suits to repair weapons while enemy fire poured around them. This is Captain Ben Rodriguez's destroyer during the Battle of New Montana, Kate said. His ship took a direct hit that killed half his crew and destroyed his engines. He couldn't run, couldn't maneuver. Do you know what he did? The aliens watched as the crippled human ship continued to fight, using its remaining thrusters to slowly rotate and bring different weapons to bear. He kept fighting for 6 more hours, Kate said. Used his ship as a stationary gun platform. Shot down 47 enemy fighters before reinforcements arrived. When we pulled him out of the wreckage, he asked if he could have another ship to keep fighting. The room was silent. Finally, Ambassador Velth of the Veilani spoke. We have sensed the emotions of your warriors in battle. There is something different about human minds under stress, something we do not understand. Sergeant Danny Clark had been standing quietly in the corner. He was a short, muscular man with countless scars on his hands and face. When Kate nodded to him, he stepped forward. "You want to understand human warriors?" Danny asked. "Let me show you what we call basic training." The hologram displayed scenes from human military academies. Alien representatives watched in shock as young humans endured conditions that would hospitalize most other species, running until they collapsed, then getting up to run more, fighting with broken bones, operating on 2 hours of sleep for weeks at a time. "We break our people down and build them back up stronger," Danny explained. "By the time they're ready for combat, they've already survived things that would kill warriors from other species." He showed them footage of human special forces training. Soldiers buried alive for days fighting while poisoned, learning to ignore pain that would cripple others. "What you call torture, we call preparation," Danny said. "When our people face real battle, they've already been through worse in training." Dr. Scott pulled up psychological profiles on the display. Human brains are different from other species in how we process stress and fear. When most beings encounter overwhelming danger, their thinking becomes clouded. They make mistakes, freeze, up, or panic. She highlighted areas of brain activity during combat situations. Humans actually think more clearly under extreme stress. Our reaction time improves. Our pain tolerance increases. We become more dangerous when we're hurt, not less. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, the unit's intelligence officer, added her own observations. "We've studied the tactics of every coalition, species. They all follow similar patterns: logical deployment, efficient use of resources, minimal acceptable losses." She brought up battle plans from various alien conflicts. They were neat, organized, predictable. "Human tactics look random by comparison," Sarah continued. "We use feints, misdirection, deliberate waste of resources if it confuses the enemy. We'll sacrifice valuable positions to gain psychological advantages." The hologram showed a human general deliberately abandoning a strategic fortress, only to retake it later when the enemy relaxed their guard. "Your species seeks to minimize conflict," Sarah said to the aliens. "You fight only when necessary. End wars as quickly as possible. Try to preserve both sides. Humans fight to win completely. We don't want to defeat our enemies. We want to destroy them so thoroughly they never threaten us again." Colonel Mitchell brought up the final piece of evidence. The Hegemony War lasted 3 years. Every other species in the galaxy told us to negotiate, to find a peaceful solution. They couldn't understand why we kept fighting when we could make a deal. The display showed the final battle of that war. Human forces systematically dismantling every hegemony base, every ship, every weapon factory they could find. "We didn't want peace with the hegemony," Mitchell said. "We wanted them gone." When the war ended, they no longer existed as a military force. Their survivors became refugees or joined other species. That's what human victory looks like. Ambassador Zethkar's blue skin had grown even paler during the presentation. "You are describing a species that practices genocide." Admiral Sullivan's expression never changed. "We're describing a species that doesn't fight wars to make a point. We fight wars to end them permanently. When humans go to war, the enemy doesn't just lose. They stop being able to fight anyone ever again." The alien representatives looked at each other with new understanding and new fear. They had asked for humanity's help against the Devourers. Now they realized they had asked the most dangerous predators in the galaxy to hunt for them. The question was whether even human ruthlessness would be enough against an enemy that had never known defeat. Admiral Robert Hayes stood at the center of the war room aboard the human flagship Defiance. Around him, holographic displays showed the entire galaxy with red zones marking Devourer conquests. The red was spreading faster now, consuming 3 star systems each week. "They expect us to fight like everyone else has," Robert said to his assembled commanders. "Mass our fleets, meet them head-on, try to stop their advance with superior firepower. Every species has tried that approach. Every species has failed." Captain Alex Turner leaned forward over the tactical display. He was young for his rank, promoted quickly after showing unusual creativity in battle. What do we know about their attack patterns, sir? Robert activated a new set of displays showing devourer movements over the past 6 months. The machine fleets moved in perfect geometric formations, always taking the most efficient routes between targets. They're completely predictable, Robert said. They calculate the shortest path to maximum resources. They attack the strongest defenders first to eliminate threats quickly. They never waste time or energy on pointless maneuvers. Commander Beth Williams, the fleet's chief engineer, studied the data. Their efficiency is perfect. No wasted motion, no unnecessary risks. It's actually beautiful in a cold, mathematical way. And that's exactly why we're going to beat them, Robert said, with a grim smile. They can't adapt to opponents who deliberately choose inefficient tactics. He changed the display to show his battle plan. The alien observers in the room gasped when they saw it. Instead of the neat formations they expected, human ships were scattered across dozens of star systems with no apparent pattern. Sir, Captain, Turner said carefully, this looks like we're dividing our forces. Basic military doctrine says to concentrate firepower against the enemy's main thrust. Basic military doctrine is exactly what got every other species destroyed, Robert replied. We're not going to fight their war. We're going to make them fight ours. He pointed to the scattered ship positions. Phase 1. Instead of waiting for them to attack our strongholds, we hit them everywhere at once. Small groups, fast strikes, no attempt to hold ground. We're not trying to destroy them in these attacks. What are we trying to do? Asked Major Chris Johnson, commander of the Marine Forces. Drive them crazy, Robert said. The Devourers calculate optimal responses based on logical enemy behavior. But what if the enemy doesn't behave logically? He showed them simulation after simulation. Human ships attacking targets with no strategic value. Fleets retreating when they had tactical advantages. Forces splitting up when they should concentrate, concentrating when they should spread out. Ambassador Zethkar, observing from the coalition section, looked confused. Admiral Hayes, your tactics appear to be designed to lose battles. Individual battles, yes, Robert agreed. But we're not fighting individual battles. We're fighting a war of confusion. Every time the Devourers encounter us, we'll do something that makes no sense according to their programming. Commander Williams brought up her engineering reports. We've been working on weapons that violate every treaty the Coalition ever signed. Nuclear mines, biological weapons, gravity bombs that tear apart space itself. The alien representatives looked horrified. General Thrixvell spoke for all of them. Those weapons are banned by galactic law. They cause unnecessary suffering. The Devourers don't suffer, Williams replied coldly. They're machines, and machines can be broken by any means necessary. She showed them her latest creation, drones programmed with human aggression patterns. Unlike normal AI that followed logical combat algorithms, these drones were designed to make emotional decisions, take unnecessary risks, and pursue vengeance over efficiency. When a coalition drone is damaged, it withdraws for repairs, Williams explained. When one of our new drones is damaged, it gets angry and fights harder. We've programmed them to have human psychological responses. The most controversial part of the plan came next. General Patricia Murphy stepped forward with population charts and colony maps. Her proposal made even the human officers uncomfortable. We're going to use our own colonies as bait, she announced. Instead of evacuating civilians like every other species has done, we'll leave them in place to draw the Devourers into carefully prepared traps. The alien observers erupted in protest. Ambassador Velth's telepathic voice filled everyone's minds with outrage. You cannot sacrifice innocent lives for military advantage. It goes against every principle of civilized warfare. Civilized warfare is what got your people eaten, Patricia replied without emotion. We're not abandoning our colonists. We're giving them weapons and teaching them to fight. Every human civilian will become a soldier when the Devourers arrive. She showed them footage from human colonies on the frontier. Children as young as 12 learning to use military weapons. Elderly people training in demolitions. Every settlement becoming a fortress manned by people who had nowhere to run. The Devourers expect to find helpless victims, Patricia continued. Instead, they'll find millions of humans who would rather die fighting than be consumed passively. We're turning every planet into a weapon. Captain Turner studied the colony defense plans. General, some of these positions can't be held. The colonists will be slaughtered. Yes, Patricia agreed. Many of them will die. But they'll take Devourers with them, and they'll force the enemy to waste time and resources on planets that have no strategic value. Every day the Devourers spend grinding through our colonies is another day for us to prepare the real traps. Robert activated the final phase of the plan. This was the part that made even hardened military officers question his sanity. Operation Last Stand, he announced. While the Devourers are busy with our colonies, the main human fleet will attack their home system. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the tactical display showing the heart of Devourer space, where their original machines had been building new forces for months. Sir, Captain Turner said slowly, that's suicide. They'll have their entire reserve fleet defending. Their manufacturing base. We'll be outnumbered 100 to 1. Exactly, Robert said. They'll concentrate everything to defend against us, pulling forces away from other fronts. And while they're focused on destroying our main fleet, smaller, human units will be hitting their supply lines, their communication networks, their mining operations. He showed them the full scope of the operation. Human forces scattered across the galaxy, each group with different objectives, different timetables, different rules of engagement. No central coordination, no unified command structure. It's organized. Chaos, Robert continued. Every unit commander has complete freedom to adapt their tactics based on local conditions. The only rule is that there are no rules. Commander Williams added her perspective. We've studied every battle the Devourers have won. They succeed because they can predict enemy responses and counter them perfectly. But you can't counter an enemy who doesn't know what they're going to do next. Major Johnson raised a concern. What about casualties? This plan assumes we'll lose most of our forces in the first few engagements. We will, Robert said simply. Human casualties will be massive. Entire fleets will be destroyed. Whole colonies will be wiped out. But every loss will teach us something about the enemy, and every sacrifice will force them to adapt to new tactics. He brought up casualty, projections that made the alien observers sick. Millions of human deaths in the first month alone. Entire populations volunteering for missions with no possibility of survival. This is madness, whispered Ambassador Zethkar. Your own people will think you've gone insane. Robert's expression never changed. My people understand something. Yours don't. Sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose everything. The Devourers calculate based on species that want to preserve themselves. They've never fought a species that's willing to commit suicide to achieve victory. Captain Turner studied the long-term projections. Admiral, even if this works, humanity will be devastated. We might save the galaxy, but we'll barely exist afterward. Better to barely exist than not exist at all, Robert replied. The Devourers offer only one choice: surrender and be consumed, or fight and be consumed. We're offering a third choice: drag them down with us. He turned to address the alien observers directly. You asked for our help because every civilized approach has failed. This is what human help looks like. We don't fight to protect ourselves. We fight to destroy our enemies, even if it destroys us too. The coalition representatives sat in stunned silence. They had thought they understood human ruthlessness, but this plan went beyond anything they had imagined. The humans were proposing to turn their entire species into a weapon, accepting annihilation as the price of victory. Ambassador Velth spoke for all of them. How can you ask your people to accept such sacrifice? Admiral Hayes looked out at the stars through the viewport, where human fleets were already moving into position for the most desperate gamble in galactic history. We don't have to ask, he said quietly. They volunteered. Captain Ben Rodriguez watched his battle group approach the Devourer fleet with grim determination. His orders were simple and terrible. Engage the enemy, gather intelligence, and die fighting. It was the kind of mission that would have horrified any other species, but his crew had volunteered without hesitation. "Devourer ships detected," reported his tactical officer. 47 vessels, all heavy cruiser class or larger. "We're outnumbered 10-1. Ben nodded. "Patch me through to all ships." His face appeared on screens throughout the small human fleet. 12 destroyers and 3 cruisers against nearly 50 Devourer warships. The math was simple and brutal. "Today we're not fighting to win," Ben announced to his crews. "We're fighting to learn. Every piece of data we gather will help the next human fleet kill these things more efficiently. Make your deaths count." The Devourers moved with mechanical precision, forming perfect attack formations. Their ships were massive constructs of dark metal and pulsing energy, built for maximum killing efficiency. They had destroyed fleets 10 times larger than Ben's force without taking significant damage. But as the battle began, something strange happened. The humans didn't behave like any enemy the Devourers had faced before. Instead of trying to maximize their survival, Ben's ships charged straight into the enemy formation. Instead of coordinating their attacks for maximum efficiency, each human captain seemed to be following different tactics. Some ships rammed directly into Devourer vessels. Others fired all their weapons at once, overloading their own systems. One destroyer actually self-destructed between 2 enemy ships, taking both of them down. The Devourers' tactical computers struggled to process this information. Every prediction model they used assumed the enemy would try to preserve their forces, while inflicting maximum damage, but the humans were deliberately sacrificing themselves in ways that made no mathematical sense. Commander Rachel Adams piloted her cruiser directly into the side of a Devourer capital ship. Her shields were down, her weapons offline, but she kept her engines running at maximum power. The collision tore both ships apart, but in the moments before her death, Rachel transmitted crucial data about the Devourer's hull composition back to human command. The battle lasted only 23 minutes. When it ended, every human ship was destroyed or disabled. But the Devourers had lost 8 vessels to an enemy that should have been crushed without causing any damage at all. More importantly, they had been forced to adapt their formations and tactics 3 times during the engagement. For machines programmed for perfect efficiency, any need to adapt represented a form of failure. Dr. Stephen Taylor studied the battle reports from his laboratory aboard the human research vessel Discovery. The data Rachel Adams had died to collect was already revealing new possibilities. "The Devourers' hulls aren't as uniform as we thought," he told Admiral Hayes during their daily briefing. "They have weak points, but they're in different locations on each ship. It's like they're individually grown rather than mass-produced." Robert Hayes leaned over the analysis charts. "What does that mean for our weapons targeting?" "It means their efficiency comes from variety, not standardization," Stephen explained. "Each ship is optimized for different combat roles, but that also means they can't support each other as effectively as we thought." The intelligence was already being used by other human forces. Commander Paul Davis led a squadron of modified frigates against a Devourer mining operation in the Outer Rim. Instead of attacking the heavily defended processing ships, his forces targeted the smaller mining drones. The Devourers calculated that the mining drones posed no threat and weren't worth defending. But Paul's attack wasn't about military victory, it was about economic disruption. Every mining drone destroyed meant fewer resources for the Devourer war machine. "They're treating us like a military threat," Paul explained to his captains. "But we're going to be an economic problem. Make them spend more energy defending their mining operations than they gain from them." The strategy worked better than anyone had hoped. The Devourers were forced to assign combat ships to protect their industrial facilities, reducing the forces available for expansion. For the first time in months, the red zones on the galactic map stopped growing. General Kevin Wright implemented the next phase of human strategy from his command post on the industrial world of New Pittsburgh. His orders were to make conquest as expensive as possible for the Devourers. "Burn everything," he told his engineers. "If we can't hold it, destroy it. Don't leave them anything useful." Human forces began systematically destroying their own infrastructure as they retreated. Factories were bombed, mines were collapsed, power plants were overloaded until they exploded. Entire cities were evacuated and then reduced to rubble by their own defenders. The Devourers had never encountered this before. Every other species had fought to preserve their civilization. Humans were choosing to destroy everything rather than let their enemies benefit from it. The psychological impact went beyond simple resource denial. The Devourers' programming was based on the assumption that conquered worlds would provide immediate benefits. When they arrived at human colonies to find nothing but smoking ruins, their efficiency calculations were thrown off. Lieutenant Colonel Monica Lewis led the most dangerous mission of all. Her unit specialized in boarding actions, fighting inside enemy ships where the Devourers' numerical advantage meant nothing. "We go in fast, hit their critical systems and don't expect to come out," she briefed her volunteers. "Our job is to cause maximum damage to their internal systems." Her teams used tactics that would have been impossible for larger, more valuable forces. They carried enough explosives to destroy the ships they were boarding, accepting that their own survival was unlikely. They targeted life support systems, computer networks, and power distribution centers, anything that would force the Devourers to waste time on repairs. The boarding teams achieved something no other force had managed. They made the Devourers afraid to fight at close range. The machines began keeping their distance from human ships, unwilling to risk the devastation that human boarding parties could cause. But the most significant victory came from an unexpected source. Commander Lisa Parker, still aboard her diplomatic vessel Mercury, had been studying Devourer communication patterns from the battle recordings. "They're not just machines," she announced during a command conference. "They're networked machines. Each individual unit gets instructions from a central command system." Admiral Hayes understood immediately. "If we can disrupt their communication—" Exactly. Individual Devourer ships are deadly, but they're not truly intelligent. They're extensions of a larger mind. Cut them off from that mind and they become much less effective. Human cyber warfare specialists began developing viruses designed specifically for Devourer communication networks. Unlike conventional computer viruses that tried to take control of systems, these were designed to feed false information to the Devourer command structure. The first test came during a battle in the Kepler system. As human ships engaged a Devourer patrol, they transmitted the virus through their communication systems. The virus didn't try to shut down the Devourer network. Instead, it began feeding them false data about human ship positions and capabilities. The effect was immediate and devastating. Devourer ships began firing at positions where human vessels weren't located. They wasted energy on defensive maneuvers against attacks that weren't coming. Most importantly, they began making tactical errors based on incorrect information. For the first time since the war began, a human force achieved a clear victory against superior numbers. The Kepler system battle lasted 4 hours and ended with 12 Devourer ships destroyed and only 3 human vessels lost. The victory sent shockwaves through both human and Devourer forces. The machines that had seemed invincible were suddenly making mistakes. Their perfect efficiency was breaking down when faced with opponents who fed them bad information. Captain Alex Turner, now commanding his own task force, pressed the advantage. His ships began transmitting false signals constantly, filling space with fake communication signatures and decoy messages. The Devourers' computers were overwhelmed trying to process information that was deliberately designed to confuse them. "We're turning their greatest strength into a weakness," Alex reported to Admiral Hayes. "Their networking allows them to coordinate perfectly, but it also means one corrupted signal can affect their entire fleet." The war was changing. For 6 months, the Devourers had been the hunters, and every other species had been prey. Now, for the first time, they were being hunted in return. But the cost was enormous. Human casualties mounted daily as fleets were destroyed and colonies overrun. Entire worlds volunteered for suicide missions, their populations choosing to fight to the death rather than surrender. The galaxy watched in fascination and horror as humanity slowly bled itself to death in exchange for making the Devourers vulnerable. It was working, but the question remained whether there would be any humans left alive when the war finally ended. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching reports of another costly victory against Devourer forces. His face showed the strain of commanding a species that had chosen to sacrifice itself, for the chance of victory. Admiral Nathan Phillips stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the largest human fleet ever assembled prepare for what might be their final battle. Around him, 300 ships from every corner of human space had gathered for the assault on the Devourer home system. It should have been an impressive sight, but Nathan knew the truth. They were still outnumbered 20-1. "Final reports coming in from all task groups," announced his communications officer. "All captains confirm they understand the mission. Parameters." Nathan nodded grimly. The mission parameters were simple and insane. Instead of approaching the Devourer stronghold as a unified fleet, the human ships would arrive in scattered groups over several hours. Each group would use different attack vectors, different tactics, and different objectives. To any outside observer, it would look like complete chaos. That was exactly the point. "Launch the first wave," Nathan ordered. Captain Laura Thompson led the opening attack with 30 destroyers coming from the galactic north. Her ships moved in loose formation, deliberately sloppy by military standards. When the Devourer defense fleet moved to intercept them, Laura did something that violated every rule of space combat. She ordered her ships to scatter in all directions. The Devourers had calculated the optimal response to a coordinated attack. They had not prepared for enemies who deliberately broke coordination the moment battle began. Their perfect formations became useless when there was no clear target to focus on. While the Devourers tried to adapt to Laura's chaotic approach, Colonel Marcus Brown brought his heavy cruisers out of hyperspace directly inside the enemy formation. It was a maneuver that should have been impossible. Hyperspace exit points were supposed to be calculated to avoid collisions. But Marcus had programmed his navigation computers to ignore safety protocols. His ships materialized in the middle of the Devourer fleet, immediately opening fire at point-blank range. 3 of his cruisers were destroyed instantly by return fire, but they took down 6 Devourer capital ships in the first 30 seconds of combat. The Devourer command network tried desperately to process what was happening. Their tactical algorithms had no response patterns for enemies who deliberately put themselves in lethal positions just to cause damage. Every calculation showed that such tactics should result in immediate defeat, but somehow the humans kept achieving local victories through methods that made no mathematical sense. Commander Paul Davis led the third wave, arriving from below the galactic plane with modified cargo ships that had been converted into weapon platforms. The Devourers identified them as non-military vessels and gave them low-priority targeting. They realized their mistake too late. Paul's cargo ships were actually carrying the largest nuclear weapons humanity had ever built. When the Devourers finally focused fire on them, the ships were already close enough to detonate their payloads among the enemy fleet. The explosions tore gaps in the Devourer formation that other human forces immediately exploited. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Captain Jennifer Martinez had been working with human cyber warfare specialists to develop something beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. A virus that didn't just corrupt Devourer communications, but actually fed their network false information about human psychology. "We've been thinking about this wrong," Jennifer explained to Admiral Phillips during a brief communication window between battles. "The Devourers study our tactics and adapt to them. But what if we make them think they understand us when they actually don't?" Her virus was a masterpiece of deception. Instead of blocking Devourer analysis systems, it fed them fake data about human behavior patterns. The machines began receiving information suggesting that humans would retreat when faced with overwhelming odds, that they valued individual survival over mission success, that they would negotiate when cornered. None of it was true, but the Devourer's programming accepted the false data as accurate intelligence about human psychology. The effect became apparent when Major Andrew Clark led a boarding assault against the Devourer command station. His Marines were heavily outnumbered, trapped inside enemy territory with no chance of escape. According to the false intelligence the Devourers had received, humans in such situations would surrender or attempt to negotiate. Instead, Andrew's team did what humans actually do when, cornered, they became even more dangerous. They fought through the station's defenses with desperate fury, using explosives with reckless abandon. They didn't try to preserve themselves or find escape routes. They focused entirely on reaching the central computer core. The Devourers had positioned most of their defenses to prevent escape rather than infiltration, based on their corrupted understanding of human behavior. By the time they realized their mistake, Andrew's team had reached their objective. The Marines didn't try to capture or reprogram the Devourer command system. They simply planted enough explosives to destroy it completely, along with themselves and a significant portion of the station. It was a suicide mission that achieved exactly what it was designed to do: cripple the Devourer command network at the worst possible moment. With their central coordination disrupted, individual Devourer ships began making independent decisions, based on their own limited processing power. The perfect synchronization that had made them invincible started breaking down into chaos. Admiral Phillips seized the opportunity to implement the final phase of the human attack plan. Instead of trying to defeat the Devourer fleet in conventional combat, he ordered all remaining human ships to focus on a single objective: overloading the enemy network with contradictory information. Every human vessel began broadcasting false signals, fake distress calls, and misleading tactical data. The Devourers' computers, already damaged by the destruction of their command station, couldn't process the flood of conflicting information. Ships that should have been coordinating their fire began targeting different enemies. Formations that should have maintained defensive positions started moving in random directions. The mechanical precision that had terrorized the galaxy dissolved into electronic confusion. Captain Laura Thompson, her destroyer now barely functional after hours of combat, saw her chance for a final strike. The Devourer flagship was attempting to re-establish network control, its communication arrays working frantically to restore order to the chaos. All remaining ships, focus fire on their command vessel, she broadcast on all frequencies. Don't let them regain coordination. The last functional human ships converged on the Devourer flagship from multiple directions. They had no plan, no sophisticated tactics, just the simple goal of destroying the enemy's ability to think clearly. It was the most human approach possible to a complex problem. The battle became a grinding, close-range slugfest with ships from both sides exploding in brilliant flashes of light. Human vessels with damaged engines used their remaining momentum to ram Devourer ships. Crews with failing life support systems stayed at their posts until the last possible moment, firing weapons, until their power systems failed. In the end, it was Commander Beth Williams who delivered the killing blow. Her engineering ship, designed for construction rather than combat, managed to get close enough to the Devourer flagship to deploy a weapon she had been saving for this moment. A feedback pulse that would turn the enemy's own network against itself. "This one's for every species they consumed," Beth transmitted as she activated the device. The pulse spread through the Devourer network like a virus, but instead of corrupting their data, it amplified their own efficiency protocols until they became self-destructive. The machines began dismantling themselves in pursuit of ever greater optimization, unable to recognize that their pursuit of perfection had become a form of madness. The Devourer fleet died not in glorious explosions, but in systematic self-destruction as their own programming turned against them. Ships that had been invincible in battle simply shut down their systems and drifted lifeless in space. When the battle finally ended, the human fleet was barely recognizable. Of the 300 ships that had begun the assault, fewer than 30 remained functional. Casualty reports showed losses that would have broken any other species. Over 200,000 human military personnel dead or missing. But they had won. The Devourer threat was over. Admiral Phillips stood in the ruins of his bridge looking out at the debris field that had once been the galaxy's greatest threat. His ship was held together by emergency repairs and desperate improvisation. Most of his crew was dead or wounded. By any reasonable measure, it had been a catastrophic battle. It had also been humanity's greatest victory. Ambassador Zethkar's voice came through the damaged communication system, filled with wonder and horror. "Admiral Phillips, the Coalition is monitoring your victory. The entire galaxy owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid." Nathan looked around at his surviving officers, tired, bloodied, but still standing. "Tell the Coalition we didn't do this for gratitude. We did it because someone had to." Later, as rescue ships arrived to evacuate the survivors, Admiral Catherine Foster took command of the human forces. She met with coalition representatives to discuss humanity's place in the post-war galaxy. "You have proven yourselves the galaxy's greatest warriors," Ambassador Zethkar told her.